The primacy of the Bishop of Rome is an ecclesiastical doctrine concerning the respect and authority that is due to the Pope from other bishops and their sees. Aidan Nichols wrote that, at root, only one issue of substance divides the Orthodox and the Catholic churches, and that is the issue of the primacy. Jean-Claude Lachette wrote that together with the Filioque controversy, differences in interpretation of this doctrine have been and remain the primary causes of schism between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. In the Eastern Orthodox churches, some understand the primacy of the Bishop of Rome to be merely one of greater honor, regarding him as primus inter pares, without effective power over other churches. Other Orthodox Christian theologians, however, view primacy as authoritative power, the expression, manifestation and realization in one bishop of the power of all the bishops, and of the unity of the Church. The Roman Catholic Church attributes to the primacy of the Pope full, supreme, and universal power over the whole Church, a power which he can always exercise unhindered, a power that it attributes also to the entire body of the bishops united with the Pope. The power that it attributes to the Pope's primatial authority has limitations that are official, legal, dogmatic, and practical. In 2007, representatives of the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church jointly stated that both East and West accept the fact of the Bishop of Rome's primacy at the universal level, but that differences of understanding exist about how the primacy is to be exercised and about its scriptural and theological foundations. Dogma within Latin and Eastern Catholic churches. The Roman Catholic dogma of the primacy of the Bishop of Rome is codified in both codes of canon law of the Roman Catholic Church, the Latin Church's 1983 Code of Canon Law and the Eastern Catholic Church's 1990 Code of Canons of the Eastern Churches. The Second Vatican Council's 1964 dogmatic constitution Lumen Gentium declared that the Pope's power of primacy is by virtue of his office, that is as Vicar of Christ and Pastor of the whole Church, and his full, supreme and universal power over the Church which is always free to exercise the primacy of the Bishop of Rome, according to John Harden. In Catholic Dictionary, is primacy of jurisdiction, which means the possession of full and supreme teaching, legislative, and sacerdotal powers in the Catholic Church. It is authority, not only in faith and morals but church discipline and in the government of the Church. In 1983 CIC Canon 331. The Bishop of Roman Church is both the Vicar of Christ and Pastor of the Universal Church on earth. Knut Wolf, in New Commentary on the Code of Canon Law, notes that this description, Bishop of the Roman Church, is only found in this canon, and the term Roman Pontiff is generally used in 1983 CIC. Ernest Caparros al. Code of Canon Law annotated comments that this canon pertains to all individuals and groups of faithful within the Latin Church, of all rights and hierarchical ranks, not only in matters of faith and morals but also in all that concerns the discipline and government of the Church throughout the whole world. Heinrich Denzinger. Peter Hahnemann al. in Charidion Symbolorum states that Christ did not form the Church as several distinct communities, but unified through full communion with the Bishop of Rome and profession of the same faith with the Bishop of Rome. The Bishop of Rome is the supreme authority of the SUIURI's Eastern Catholic Churches. In CCO Canon 45, the Bishop of Rome has, by virtue of his office, both power over the entire Church, and primacy of ordinary power over all the epichesan groupings of them within each of the Eastern Catholic Churches. Through the office of the Supreme Pastor of the Church, he is in communion with the other bishops, and with the entire Church, and has the right to determine whether to exercise this authority either personally or collegially. This primacy over the entire Church includes primacy over Eastern Catholic patriarchs and eparchial bishops, over governance of institutes of consecrated life, and over judicial affairs. Primacy of the Bishop of Rome was also codified in the 1917 Code of Canon Law, Canons 218 to 221. Development of the doctrine. The Roman Catholic Church bases its doctrine of papal primacy on the primacy among the apostles that Jesus gave to Peter in Matthew chapter 16 verses 16 to 19. Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And in John chapter 21 verses 15 to 17, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, while acknowledging that the New Testament contains no explicit record of a transmission of Peter's leadership, nor is the transmission of apostolic authority in general very clear. It considers that its doctrine has a developmental history and that its teaching about matters such as the Trinity, the divinity of Christ, and the union of his two natures in a single person developed as the result of drawing out from the original revealed truth consequences that were not obvious at first. Thanks to the assistance of the Holy Spirit, the understanding of both the realities and the words of the heritage of faith is able to grow in the life of the Church through the contemplation and study of believers who ponder these things in their hearts. It is in particular theological research which deepens knowledge of revealed truth. Accordingly, it would be a mistake to expect to find the modern fully developed doctrine of papal primacy in the first centuries, thereby failing to recognize the Church's historical reality. The figure of the Pope as leader of the worldwide Church developed over time, as the figure of the Bishop as leader of the local Church seems to have appeared later than in the time of the Apostles. That the Christian scriptures, which contain no cut-in-dried answers to questions such as whether there is forgiveness for post-baptismal sins or whether infants should be baptized, gradually become clearer in the light of events, is a view expressed, when considering the doctrine of papal primacy, by Cardinal John Henry Newman, who summed up his thought by saying, "Developments of Christianity are proved to have been in the contemplation of its divine author, by an argument parallel to that by which we infer intelligence in the system of the physical world. In whatever sense the need and its supply are a proof of design in the visible creation, in the same do the gaps, if the word may be used, which occur in the structure of the original creed of the Church, make it probable that those developments, which grow out of the truths which lie around them, were intended to fill them up." Writers such as Nikolai Afanasiev and Alexander Schmemann have written that the phrase, "presiding in a gape," used of the Church of Rome in the letter that Ignatius of Antioch addressed to it in the early 2nd century, contains a definition of that Church's universal primacy, but the Roman Catholic writer Klaus Schatz warns that it would be wrong to read as statements of the developed Roman Catholic teaching on papal primacy this letter and the even earlier first epistle of Clement, in which the Church of Rome intervenes in matters of the Church of Corinth, admonishing it in authoritative tones, even speaking in the name of God. It was only later that the expression of Ignatius of Antioch could be interpreted as meaning, as agreed by representatives of both the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox churches, that Rome, as the Church that presides in love, according to the phrase of Saint Ignatius of Antioch, occupied the first place in the taxis, and that the Bishop of Rome was therefore the protus among the patriarchs. The same agreement stated, in the history of the East and of the West, at least until the 9th century, a series of prerogatives was recognized, always in the context of conciliarity, according to the conditions of the times, for the protus or cephal at each of the established ecclesiastical levels. Locally, for the bishop as protus of his diocese with regard to his presbyterism people; regionally, for the protus of each metropolis with regard to the bishops of his province; and for the protus of each of the 5 patriarchates, with regard to the metropolitans of each circumscription, and universally, for the Bishop of Rome as protis among the patriarchs. This distinction of levels does not diminish the sacramental equality of every bishop or the Catholicity of each local church. Basis of claims to primacy. Peter and Paul. The evolution of earlier tradition established both Peter and Paul as the forefathers of the bishops of Rome, from whom they received their position as chief shepherd and supreme authority on doctrine. To establish her primacy among the churches of the western half of the empire, the bishops of Rome relied on a letter written in 416 by Innocent I to the Bishop of Gubbio, to show how subordination to Rome had been established. Since Peter was the only apostle to have worked in the West, thus the only persons to have established churches in Italy, Spain, Gaul, Sicily, Africa, and the Western Islands were bishops appointed by Peter or his successors. This being the case then, all congregations had to abide by the regulations set in Rome. Primacy of Peter the Apostle because of its association with the supposed position of Peter among the apostles. The function that within the Roman Catholic Church is exercised by the Bishop of Rome among the bishops as a whole is referred to as the Petrine function, and is generally believed to be of divine institution, in the sense that the historical and sociological factors that influenced its development are seen as guided by the Holy Spirit. Not all Roman Catholic theologians see a special providential providence as responsible for the result, but most see the papacy, regardless of its origin, as now essential to the Church's structure. The presence of Peter in Rome, not explicitly affirmed in but consistent with the New Testament, is explicitly affirmed by Clement of Rome, Ignatius of Antioch, Irenaeus of Lyon and other early Christian writers, and no other place has ever claimed to be the location of his death. The same witnesses imply that Peter was the virtual founder of the Church of Rome, though not its founder in the sense of initiating a Christian community there. They also speak of Peter as the one who initiated its episcopal succession, but speak of Linus as the first bishop of Rome after Peter, although some hold today that the Christians in Rome did not act as a single united community under a single leader until the 2nd century. Classic Roman Catholic tradition maintained that the universal primacy of the Bishop of Rome was divinely instituted by Jesus Christ. This was derived from the Petrine texts, and from the Gospel accounts of Matthew, Luke and John according to the Roman tradition. They all refer not simply to the historical Peter, but to his successors to the end of time. Today, scriptural scholars of all traditions agree that we can discern in the New Testament an early tradition which attributes a special position to Peter among Christ's 12 apostles. The Church built its identity on them as witnesses, and responsibility for pastoral leadership was not restricted to Peter. In Matthew chapter 16 verse 19, Peter is explicitly commissioned to bind and loose. Later, in Matthew chapter 18 verse 18, Christ directly promises all the disciples that they will do the same. Similarly, the foundation upon which the Church is built is related to Peter in Matthew chapter 16 verse 16, and to the whole apostolic body elsewhere in the New Testament. Role of Paul in the founding of the Church of Rome. Irenaeus of Lyon wrote that Peter and Paul had founded of the Church in Rome and had appointed Pope Linus to the office of the episcopate, the beginning of the succession of the Roman See. Although the introduction of Christianity was not due to them, the arrival, ministries and especially the martyrdoms of Peter and Paul were the seminal events which really constituted the Church of Rome.